everybody. It's Wendy Harrington with Tap This Group, here with recording number 4, no conversation with Sylvia Inks on paths to higher profit revenue. I started this series because I enjoy working with small businesses and service businesses in particular on ways that they can attract the kind of business that will not cost them so much to get in the first place. So I work a lot with people on customer retention and segmentation and all those sort of things. But there are a lot of different ways to grow profit in your business. And one of the first people that I encountered when I started the business back in January was a brilliant financial whiz who is also a business whiz named Sylvia Inks. She runs SMI Financial Coaching. Just want to make sure I get that right. And I have read her book, which make sure that it doesn't do ghostly things, and loved it, and then signed up for her course, which I will give some links to in the comments. Master the Money in Your Small Business, I think is its full name. And I feel like she has so much to share. And on this topic, she had suggested maybe we look at one of the areas that she sees people struggle with, which is pricing, profits, and discounts, which of course all impact your profitability. Yeah. So big welcome to Sylvia. I'm so glad that you've carved out some time today for everybody. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your business, your passion, and kind of how you got to this.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you so much for having me. Again, I'm Sylvia Inks. I am the founder of SMI Financial Coaching, and I help coaches, consultants, and service providers really look at how to grow their business and make more money so they can have a bigger impact and serve more. And what I see is that there's so many small business owners, they've got a great product, they've got a great service, right? Like they're an expert in their thing, but they're not so good with their finances. And so I've seen that make or break a business, right? And I've seen a lot of good business owners go out of business for what I would say avoidable mistakes. And a lot of them is around pricing. And so that's what that was my passion, was getting into this, helping small business owners succeed. And that started with my book that you shared earlier, in Small Business Finance for the Busy Entrepreneur. Because again, a lot of business owners came into their business because they've got a passion, they've got an expertise, but they didn't go to entrepreneurship school, right? There wasn't entrepreneurship 101, or I would say most small business owners don't like finances, right? They don't want to get into the numbers. They don't want to be CPA or accountant, which I teach a lot of times in my book and my course. I don't need you to be a CPA or accountant, but I need you to understand some of the basics to make sure that you set up your business for success.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I know through some of the programs that we've done, both the class and now a sort of membership program, that one of the things that I think is intimidating for a lot of us is, brings up all of the imposter syndrome issues, and everything else does really start with pricing. And, even once you've worked out kind of all the hard calculations, this is how much I want to make, and this is how many hours I want to work, and these are the things I'm going to offer, all of those bits and pieces, even if you've got all of those ducks in a row, right? And I know that you'll probably share some tips on that in a little bit, but I think then the next thing that is challenging is holding the line. I had a conversation with somebody this week actually, where they were asking roughly what does it cost to do the website copy, and so I talked them through kind of the typical scenario, knowing that each person gets a unique quote, and even in that, his first thing was, well, is there wiggle room on that? And I'm like, it took everything that I had to be like, and everybody gets a custom quote. So, no hard promises here, but, it's of course, there's nothing to say that people shouldn't ask for the discount, but you need to find that thing in you that helps you not give the discount if that's not something that works, kind of in your model. But, I'm sure that you work with people on this all the time.
Well, I hear what you just brought up actually brings up something that we covered this in my course, is money mindset. Where did your money mindset start from? And a lot of it is just, things that we hear growing up, or things that we saw how money was being dealt or not dealt when we were growing up. And I do think that really impacts a lot of small business owners and how they approach pricing, how they, approach negotiations or discounts. And I see that happen in people's businesses.
Hmm. It's interesting. I never really thought about it this way before, but I got into the advertising profession because my dad had a small ad agency. And we worked with big publishers, national publishers, and I worked with him for 8 or 9 years, I think. And even towards the end was, vice president and doing all these things. But we really never delved into the rationale of pricing. That he had kind of decided all of that, and as open as he was to having women and we were, he had 2 daughters, empowering us was his thing. But we never talked about investing.
Yep.
And he had good solid investing advice. We never talked about the finances in the business. I learned everything that I knew about money from my mom's home money management. And that really never dawned on me before, that this is, so much about it, of our expectations and what we know are grounded in, in our home, in our upbringing, that even then when we go into business, I can put on a different hat if I'm thinking corporate, but I don't necessarily always put on that corporate money hat when I'm figuring out pricing for my personal consulting work. It's a conscious effort that it requires to do that. And it requires a lot of backup from people like you to let you stay in that. So,
well, yes, especially if you grew up in a family where money was super scarce or money was considered a bad topic. I see a lot of people get really nervous about pricing, right? So then again, to your point, if somebody's coming to you about like, what are you charging? What are you pricing? And if you don't have clear boundaries, if you're like, no, here's my pricing, or no, there's no discount, like, unless you've worked on it and recognize how your money mindset or how things you heard growing up impact how you do with your business, you could get in a situation where you're underpricing yourself because you feel like you don't deserve to make too much, a lot of money, because maybe you heard money growing up was money's bad, it's rich people are greedy. So if you heard any of those mindsets, it can affect how you price your services and your offerings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So are there some things that you would suggest people, and I'm sure it can take a lot more work than, whatever, 2 minutes conversation, but are there any things that are sort of good starting points that you find for when you're working with people to get them either to recognize the mindset that they have, or shake things up a little bit if it, you can spot it right away?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just kind of writing down just like any of the things that you heard and saw about money as you dealt with when you were growing up, right? Like just writing those all down, and then going back through and saying, how has that affected my finances so far? Or how has that impacted my business finances so far? And I think the key is just recognizing that and seeing, okay, that doesn't have to be the future. Like we can change that script, but you need to be able to recognize where you're starting from. Again, biggest mistake that I see small business owners make is that they undercharge. They completely, they don't price their services high enough. And because either one, they don't feel like they're worth it. They feel like it's, oh, I'm just starting out, so I don't want to charge too much. But then it's really, really hard to raise your prices later, right? So it's, if you're known in the community or known for X price, or you put it on your website, it's really hard later to change that, especially with existing customers.
That makes sense. No, and I think, it's interesting when you kind of open your mind up a little bit to see things differently. You're so right about people. I'm sure that I've done it as well, thinking, well, I'm just opening the doors, so therefore, shouldn't price too high. But nobody is opening their doors knowing nothing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, you may not have opened your doors in this business before, or the way that you're doing it, but you're only going in with this, to this business because you have knowledge and expertise. And that's really the deliverable that people are buying, is the results you can create, or the stress you can relieve, or whatever it is. So, that even looking at what competitive pricing isn't necessarily, that valuable, because there are going to be people at every different price point. So looking at it more from the standpoint of what you have managed to accomplish in this work in the past is a much better starting point for figuring out your pricing, I'm sure.
Right, because you're going to be an expert over someone else, right? You're going to be
Hmm.
expert or provide services that someone either doesn't have the time for nor expertise and
Hmm.
don't want to have the time to learn it on their own.
Right.
So there's people that are going to be looking for your services. So definitely never. I mean, I actually had a client once who undercut. She knowingly undercut her competition. So she actually did do the research and found what her competitors were charging, and then significantly charged less, hoping she was going to attract and bring a bunch of customers into her business as she started. And then she had a very, very difficult time raising her prices afterwards because
Mm.
those people were price shopping and price
Hmm.
hopping. So you're not going to build a loyal customer base if you're only going to be competing on price, especially if
Right.
you're a small business owner.
Oh, sure. And there are plenty of people who will be concerned about going with the lowest price person anyway, because you figure you're going to be losing something.
Yes.
Either it's the expertise isn't going to be quite there, or your professionalism, or communication, responsiveness,
Right.
something. There's going to be something. uh, it's going to be the risk, and a lot of people will be concerned about that. So, yeah.
You bring up a really good point. I actually just gave this coaching advice to somebody yesterday.
Mm.
They wanted to price something, a new offering, and they wanted to price it at $10, like something really, really super cheap. And I told her, I actually said, I think that people are going to wonder, are they going to get any value out of this? It
Mm.
doesn't seem like there's enough in there if it's only going to be $10, right? It was
Hmm.
a passive product, so it wasn't service, but it was just a side product that she was going to test out. And I said, I wouldn't pay $10 for it because I don't
Mm.
think that I would think it would worth my time. So definitely be careful about pricing yourself too low, because people may think, oh, well, maybe you're not the expert like everybody else. If they're charging 300 for something, but you're only charging 125, they might,
Right.
like, they all automatically might think that you're an amateur, right? So
Hmm.
just be careful about the perception of your pricing.
Yeah. Or you're going to be doing some really hard sell for something expensive at the end, one
Yes.
or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hmm. So, are there other mistakes that you see people making a lot, that in setting their prices, or
Yeah.
discounts, if that's a bigger issue?
So yeah, the second one was just not calculating your cost of goods sold, and to understand your break-even point. Right. So I know it's really hard for service business owners because a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, it doesn't really cost me anything to do this. It's just my time. And I would say, well, actually, no, it's not, right? Like, if you have to make sure that your services are paying for keeping the lights on, right? Like, if you've got a business, you've got, most likely you have a website, you've got, scheduling tool, you have a CPA that you're paying for. So like, you really need to figure out, like, what does it cost you to run your business, and making sure that you've priced it so that your services pay, that how many clients do I need to have, or how many of these products do I need to sell to just break even every month,
Hmm.
right? So, and understanding your cost of goods sold. And then really thinking bigger, thinking outside the box of, it's not just your time, because a lot of business owners, as you get more successful, you are going to either have to hire staff or hire a virtual assistant. So you want to be able to make sure that you're covering their time.
Hmm.
So if you're pricing yourself too low and not at a place where you can hire assistant and still pay yourself at the end of the day, then you're not building in that profit margin.
Right. Yeah. I mean, time is really a difficult one, I think, because it happens on the marketing side. People think if it only costs them time, then it's free.
Yep.
But if, as you say, if that's how you factor your whole financial structure, you will very quickly have no time to serve your clients,
Yeah.
no time to do anything but the business, which is just worse than working for another employer who wants
Yeah.
you to do nothing but work. You're doing it for yourself, and
Yeah.
you're not necessarily building yourself something that you can get out of, because
Yeah.
you haven't figured out the pricing in a way that can let you offload things. So yeah,
Correct.
that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that's probably one of the first steps that you take when you're working with somebody on a
I
one-on-one
do.
level.
I do. This is probably the biggest place where I hear small business owners say, I don't understand, why is there not money at the end of the month at the bank account? I've got, business is so great. I've got this huge social media following. I've sold X amount of, services or products. And they're like, but at the end of the month, there's not much left over to pay myself or do X, Y, Z. And it's because they haven't factored in, as they're pricing their services or their products, the profit margin. And is there money left over at the end how much money is left over after run your business.
Yeah.
So,
Does it, I guess since you're doing service businesses, do things like either retainers or, money over time, is factoring that stuff in a challenge for people normally?
So when you talk about retainer, I mean, I would say we're getting into different pricing models, right? Like I would say the biggest thing that I see a lot of small business owners do when they first start out their business is to charge by the hour, which I'm not a huge fan of. There's different pricing models depending on what you're providing, but there's the charging by the hour, charging by a session, or charging by the project, like so charging by the X deliverable, like I'm going to give you this. So I think every service business owner has to look at what's the right business model for them. But definitely, charging by the hour is probably one of the worst things that people can do for their business, because it does make it easy to do comparisons. It's like, oh, well, if you only charge $100 per hour, but this person charged 125. Okay, well, if you guys are somewhat equal, I'll just go with the cheapest, right? It just makes it too easy for people to just only price shop.
Yeah, they're not looking at the bigger benefit or
Right.
whatever other value it is that you're offering. Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. Plus, if it makes it harder, I think, even if you are dealing with tackling your own mindset issues, if you are actually very fast at something or efficient at something, it may make you feel very guilty for charging what you should be worth, because you're like, well, it only took me 3 hours. How important is that? But if the other person couldn't do it in 3 weeks, then that, this is just really value-based pricing, not just time.
Yeah. You had a really, really good point. This is something that I've also had to coach a client of mine, because I said, I pay somebody a retainer every month to help me with my website. And I said, I pay it every month. It doesn't matter to me if it takes him 5 minutes to do it or an hour to do it. Like, I don't care, because I know my things will get done. Like when I send them, for my website maintenance, like if I send my 5 tickets every month, like some months he probably really makes money on me because I'd only send some minor updates, right? And then other months he might be working a little bit harder for his money. But for me, at the end of the day, I'm like, it doesn't matter to me if it takes him only 5 minutes, because it would have taken me 3 hours or 5 hours to try to figure out how to do something new. So really, you got to think about the value. Like, people are going to pay you to solve their problems, and and really just making sure that you're seeing the value and the benefits that you can provide to your ideal customer.
Yeah. So step 1, tackling your mindset issues.
Yes.
Step 2, really understanding your value in terms of the benefit that is being delivered to the customer. So core before you do anything else. And then third, figuring out what all of your costs are.
Yes.
The cost to get there. Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense.
One of the mistakes, especially if you haven't calculated your cost of goods sold and the time, that it takes for you and future staff to help you provide this service. Biggest mistake is just discounting. Like, I see so many people discount without any rhyme or reason. They get nervous, they're on a sales call, and they feel like the person's not, saying yes right away. And so I've seen people, and I've had clients tell me that they'll just blanket, just give a number out, right? Be like, oh, I'll give you 10% off, or I'll give you $500 off, or whatever it is, to try to close the deal. And then as we go through their numbers, I'm like, okay, well, let's see what that discount did for your profit margins. And realized I had one client who got actually pretty upset, because she didn't realize she actually, by giving the discount, ended up giving her product away for free.
Oh no.
It was like, yes.
Oh, that's painful.
And again, she was like, oh, well, my product's $500, $600. Like, I thought, just a 10% discount wasn't going to be a big deal. But what she did, she hadn't done the exercise of the cost of goods sold, and she hadn't factored in, oh, well, you have an admin assistant that helps you do XYZ. You have to pay for that person. And so when we went through all the numbers, I was like, you actually didn't make any money. You actually handed over like I think it came out to like $5. It was like, you actually handed the customer $5 to walk away with your product. So definitely really, really being careful, and, again, tying into the calculating your cost of goods sold, and then factoring in, if you do want to give discounts, if that is part of your promotional strategy, figuring out what that profit margin is before you verbally or, send an email out to your email list saying that you're offering a discount.
Yeah. And holding back, in that sales motion or the sales interval is really difficult to be able to read whether that I think that you may even have said this at one call or something. They may actually be sitting there trying to figure out how they would move money around from one place to another to pay.
Yep.
And you, in the meantime, have just given them a discount that they didn't want.
Yep.
And they're not going to stop and say, oh, no, it's okay. I'm all right
Yep.
with paying the higher price,
Yes.
So,
Right.
so patience and just being willing to wait sometimes, is difficult, but important. So,
Yes.
mm,
I actually knew a business owner who would give discounts to family and friends, right? And you would just without the person asking. Like the person was like, "Oh, well, they knew their services, they heard good work about it," and approached this business owner, and the business owner just said, "Oh, well, here's my price because you're a friend or
mm,
acquaintance," and then ended up because they were giving the discount, they didn't prioritize the customer because they were like, oh, well, I'm not making as much money off of this
mm,
person. So I'm going to deprioritize them because this other new client that I just quoted, they're paying full price. So that's also a danger of discounting, especially to friends and family, because you don't want to get to a place where you've discounted so much that it's not your happy price. Like you're
mm,
now resentful to provide the service, or again, if you're presented with an option of like, I've only got an hour to do something, who am I going to prioritize? If you're prioritizing the person that pays you
mm.
more, the other client, you might have an unhappy client. And, not only did you give a discount, that they didn't ask for, now you've got a person who's unhappy because you didn't deliver your best quality work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's actually one of the little mantras that I go back to more often than you would imagine. It's just, wait a second. Okay, is that actually going to be my happy price? Especially if it's a one-off thing, not necessarily something that you do all the time, or
Mhm.
not your core thing, or you don't have packages. Knowing whether this is something that when you sit down to do it is
Mhm.
going to feel like a big sigh,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's right. I have to do that.
Yeah.
Not that you're even doing it for the money, but it has to feel like there's a trade-off that makes sense for whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
If it's something you really aren't excited about, you probably shouldn't be doing it at all. Uh, but yeah, that's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
Happy for everybody is the goal. Win-win all the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Making it a win-win for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Trying to think, there was something else that I should have written down because it reminded me, but now I'm not going to remember. So uh, I guess, is it better for people, well, assuming that they figured out their cogs, should they be looking at a profit margin by product or service or package or what have you, or a blanket profit margin? How do you suggest people approach looking at kind of profitability for their business if they're working on their plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely figuring out the pricing for all your products and services and figuring out the cost of goods sold, then you can calculate all the profit margins per service or per offer that you provide. And certainly there's going to be some products where maybe the profit margin isn't that high, but it gets people in the door to get to know you, because then maybe there's a natural progression. If they bought product A or service A, then they're going to funnel into the other services.
Mhm.
So definitely, I mean, I don't think there needs to be a blanket, but do think there needs to be some strategy behind it. Like if there is something, almost kind of think about it as like the grocery store model. You know how the grocery stores will do discount. I mean, again,
Mhm.
try not to do discounts, but they have some other things that are like they're loss leaders. It's like they're trying to
Mhm.
get you in the door because they know when they get you in the door, you're going to buy all these other things.
Mhm.
So it doesn't need to be a blanket profit margin across the board, but just as long as you understand what the profit margins are, so that you're not discounting where you're and ended up where you're giving away the product or service for free, right? But just
Mhm.
being mindful of like where your profit margins are, and if you only have limited time or resources, like let's say you're going to throw marketing dollars at something, like
Mhm.
really understanding which one is your most profitable product or service that you offer, so that you are marketing the right thing. If you're
Mhm.
going to be putting money into it and making sure you're getting the ROI, the return on investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure, like, factoring in how you want to work, what time commitments are required, where, I think this comes up sometimes if you're trying to decide whether you want to do retainer work or,
Mhm.
individual projects or, one-offs. And I was listening to an interesting podcast yesterday, actually. Now I can't remember what the name of the podcast actually is. I'll put it in the show notes. So it was very interesting. She was interviewing someone who had shifted because she felt like the retainer business that she was doing was um, was really getting to be more draining. You know, she didn't feel like she was getting freedom from the business. She enjoyed the work, but I think she was saying she ended up having like 3 giant launches running for people all at the same time, and you know, it was just a nightmare month or more. And so what she has shifted to is doing intensives where she does basically the same work with and for people, but in like a 24 to 48 hour period. So she charges a premium for it naturally, even though it feels like, you know, she had to persuade herself into this because, you know, in terms of just time, it feels like it's less time, but because she can concentrate, focus just on this one set of issues and one set of deliverables, and the client is doing the same thing for their part, they get weeks worth of activity done very concentratedly. The client can act on what's been delivered right away. So they have a big advantage. They have this many more weeks of benefit from the work that she's doing. So for people who are, you know, who would really like to find another model where it like it really isn't at all, you know, time for money. You know, she works for 4 clients a month, and then, you know, a day or 2 per client, and, you know, is making a nice 6-figure income. So it's just a different way of structuring the business. The person who was interviewing her does a hybrid approach because she likes to have some retainer business. So, you know, and there's a million different ways of structuring it, but it was interesting to see, you know, if people were calculating it just based on time, this was a way to really, you know, truly, I mean, the profit was through the roof, you know, relatively speaking. But the value that she's offering is really what it's all about, and that's what's keeping her, you know, successful with it. So, are there sort of interesting models that you've seen people might think about?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the approach of the kind of what you mentioned, the intensity model, right?
Mm,
Or it's the you package everything up instead of stringing it along in a retainer model. It's like, okay, because there are going to be some clients that are like, I need these results faster. Like, I don't want to string this over 6 months, you know, meeting once or twice a month. I want it all done in a month. Like, I will focus, hyper focus. So those are great, right? Because again, you can price it based on the value. The only, I guess, possible downside of it is it's not consistent, right?
mhm,
Where it's not consistent income. Whereas, you know, the retainer models, you know, the
mhm.
nice thing about retainer models, like you can guarantee that you're going to get X amount of money per month from these retainer clients so that you can plan your cash flow.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to think through the other ones. I mean, we hit on the most common ones, right? Like charging by the hour, which again, I don't particularly like because people are going to be kind of twiddling their like looking at the clock, right? It's
Mhm.
almost liken it to like a lawyer or sometimes CPAs also charge by the hour. It's like the clients are like nervous, right? They're looking at the clock all the time. Trying to think through, looking through. I mean, you could definitely do like a half day. I've seen people do, you know, day rates or half day rates. Like,
Mm,
so
mhm.
again, so similar to the intensity model, but doing everything all in one session, or even a week, and saying like, okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna, you know, work on this over the next week. You can also do commission based.
Mm,
So
mhm.
depending on the type of service you offer, you know, say I'm going to get an X% of commission based off of your results.
Mm, mhm.
And then bundled offering is one that I really like, and I kind of teach in my course is the how do you increase the average order value? Like,
Mm.
yes, maybe the customer came in for, you know, XYZ, they heard about you or are interested about XYZ service, but really maybe do they need the whole pack? Do they need 3 of your other services? So maybe it's how do you bundle that together because they're already in the buying mode.
Mm,
So how
mhm.
do you get them to want to buy more? And how do you incentivize them and tell them, hey, by doing all 3 of these, you're going to solve all your problems and be able to bundle that together.
No, that makes sense. I guess you could, in some cases, probably can wrap affiliate programs in with that. Like I could
Yep.
imagine, you know, whatever for the stuff I do, there's email marketing, but you know, they may need their email service provider, or they may
Yep.
need their CRM
Hmm.
setup, or whatever, something like that. And I know affiliate marketing is something that you do talk about some, which
Yes.
of course gives you some decent profitability there too.
Yeah, absolutely. As a passive income stream
Hmm.
source, absolutely. I think that's one area that a lot of business owners are leaving money on the table because they aren't capturing the affiliate income. So that's definitely one to
Hmm.
consider.
Hmm. Definitely. Um, What have we not covered? What else would you want to make sure people are thinking about when it comes to discounts and pricing and profits?
I think we covered all of it. I think again, just making sure, really just making sure that you are charging your happy price and making sure that you're charging at a place where you're not going to burn yourself out
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, if you're as a small business owner, we can't afford to be, I guess I'm going to compare these to like bigger box companies. Like we can't afford to be like the Walmarts, right? Like we can't afford to be the cheapest in the area because we are small business owners. We're not a big shop. We're not the Amazons of the world, right? Like it's
Hmm.
us. Most of the time when people, especially when we're starting out, people are hiring you. They're hiring you because they like you, they know you, somebody referred you, so they're working with you. So don't try to make yourself too common where you're competing on price like the Walmarts of the world, right? And yeah,
Yeah, such good advice. And I would, say to anybody that's listening, no matter who you are, it is almost guaranteed that there is some piece of your cost of goods sold that you're forgetting. Like, yeah, in the class we did, we had people who were brand new to business, people who'd been in business for, for many years. And in running through that exercise, there were pieces missing, pieces that you
yeah.
forget about, or, that you don't factor in properly or, or at all. So if working through this process is something that uh, you feel could benefit you, highly recommend you tap Sylvia for this because she knows her stuff, and because she sees so many different types of businesses, the amount of cross-referencing that she can do and bring fresh ideas for how you can make your business run more smoothly financially and really optimize things. Yeah, you can't go wrong. So highly recommend it. And I'll put some links in at the end for how you can stay in touch with her. But is there one, sort of main place that you like people to visit you at?
Yeah, I think that I would love to give everyone a free kind of tool or course. If you want to go to smifinancialcoaching.com/make more money, and I will offer
Perfect.
it's a free e-course that you can go through on your own, and we'll give you tips on how to make more money starting today in your business.
Ooh, awesome. Can't I won't do that. I'll make sure I add that into the notes as well. So
Great.
cool. Well, thanks so much, and thanks everybody for listening. And hopefully, we will see you for the next one sometime soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy, for having
Okay.
me.
All right. Bye bye.